Welcome to the TG3 podcast. I am Rob Westervelt, and I am here with Nick Willis, and we are going to talk about how do you get to a brighter future faster. Welcome back to the TG3 podcast. If you were with us in the last episode, we talked a lot about what a brand is, what a culture is, and particularly what a magic moment is. And Nick told this great story about a friend of his at Disneyland whose daughter had a truly magic moment. And what we promised you in this episode is that we're going to tell you about a not so good story that happened at Disneyland. And this is what we like to call a brand buster. And Nick, this is Nick's personal story. So he's going to share what happened to him. So give it a close listen.
Yeah, so I and my family had traveled to Disneyland. We love Disneyland, and we've had many, many great experiences there. And it was this particular trip to Disneyland. It was our first day in the park, and we were traveling to Disneyland with a 1-year-old. I don't know if that's a good idea. Maybe
was it hot too?
It was warm.
Okay.
It was warm. We'll
trying to think of what other bad conditions.
For an Oregonian, it was hot.
Okay.
But we had just gotten into the park, and everybody's excited. And so one of the first things that we did is we got a fast pass for Indiana Jones.
Now, for those who haven't been to Disneyland, fast passes are sort of your guarantee of getting on a ride without waiting like hours in line. So there's particular times where your ticket says you get in line and you don't have to wait too terribly long. It goes much faster.
Maybe a 10-minute wait or something.
Yeah. So they're really important because people strategize on you can only get so many fast passes per hour.
Yeah. And I'm a mathematician, so unfortunately I plan out our day at Disneyland down to the minute. And so I get us on every ride in the park, and it's kind of like my personal fun game to play during the day.
But I imagine the stakes are high, so they're kind of counting on you to not screw this up.
Yeah, and my wife's parents were with us, and everybody just goes where I tell them to go. So I had my plan. And part of the plan was, first thing we're going to do, Indiana Jones is a hard ride to get on. We're going to go get our fast pass, and then we're going to go do some other things.
And this is how many fast passes?
Well, for the total group, I suppose we had 6.
6, and you have to take everybody's ticket and run it through there because that's the only way you get a fast pass.
Yeah. So anyway, we did this. We got our fast passes, but like I said, we had a 1-year-old. Now, the 1-year-old can't go on the ride. And so Disney actually has this great program, and if you've never heard of this before, you actually need to know about this if you have a young child with you. And that is that they give you something called a switch pass.
Which is a lifesaver.
Yeah, it's the best thing ever, and if you don't know about it, you need to find out. But basically what happens is you bring your fast passes up and they say, okay, half your group can get on the ride right now and half of the group can stay off with the young child. And then when they're done, immediately the other half of your group can go through, and maybe they'll even let one extra person, sometimes 2, go through again so that the kids don't have to wait out. They've made some modifications to that over the years, but when we had gone, they had just changed their switch pass policies. So I'm not even sure even now exactly what the policy was. But they had changed it, and it was new. The way that they ran it through the system was new. And I already, like I said, I had planned out every detail to the minute. So I knew how to do this, but they had changed something. And so when we got up there, I did my normal routine and gave them the tickets as I thought we needed to. The first group went through. I stayed back to go in the second group. And when our first group got out, I walked up with the tickets, fully expecting to now take Another group threw on the ride, including myself. And the attendant quickly said, yeah, that's not working. Basically, you can't get on. That ticket has already been used. And I said, well, that can't be right because I did it right. Well, evidently I had not done it right. And so I said to the attendant, okay, I guess somehow I got mixed up on this. And they said something to the effect that maybe they had changed some of the rules around switch passes. And I said, okay, I'm really sorry about that, but I haven't got to go on the ride yet. And so could I go through with my daughters, basically, and my wife? And because the grandparents had already gone through. And they said, no.
And this was you just needed one more ticket, right?
Yes, just one.
Which was yours.
We could do 3, but we could not do 4. So if we could only do 3, the girls could go again, and we weren't going to have the girls stay out with the baby, obviously. And so the girls were going to get to go through, and one more, not 2. So I had made a mistake. I to this day, I still don't know exactly what it was. I got it corrected later in the day, but I was standing there and I was like, I could just literally walk in there if you would just let me. And there was really not a lot of people around. Mm-hmm. It wasn't like it was just packed with people, lines going everywhere. That it was just me and this attendant talking. And I said, I guess I messed up. Could I just go through? And the answer I was given was no.
So it sounds like there's this situation where there's clearly an easy magic moment about to be had, where you're like, oh man, something happened and I just need one fast pass.
Yes.
And to go with my daughters and my wife.
Yes. In really one of our first major rides of the day.
It's the start of your vacation.
It's the start of the trip.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so we were, obviously I was upset. Mm-hmm. And I let my wife go with my daughters on Indiana Jones. And that day, because Indiana Jones is a super popular ride and there's lots of things to do, that trip to Disney, I did not ride Indiana Jones. And it's one of my favorite rides at Disneyland. And I was rightfully so a little bit upset about it. Now, I didn't force the issue and make a scene or anything. I just kind of quietly thought, well, I guess I messed it up and I need to figure out how to not do this again. But it's a great example of somebody right there had the power to fix this brand buster moment, because I even thought at that moment, I was like, man, this guy's not going to work at Disney very long.
Interesting. He violated the culture. As we talked about in the last episode, it sounds like he violated the brand's culture.
That's right. And I think that it actually speaks to Disneyland's brand that I even had that thought.
Yes, absolutely. Because when you think about Disneyland, you don't think about something like that happening. You think of the opposite.
Right. So my wife and my daughters went through, and that's really the end of the story in some sense, is I didn't get to go. And it was a total brand buster moment for Disney. It was like I came in expecting the happiest place on earth, and right off the bat, I sort of got slapped in the face. Now, to be fair, the rest of the day was great. And the next ride I went to, I said, okay, I just had some problems with a switch pass situation. So could you walk me through this again? Because I thought I knew what I was doing, but evidently I do not. And she walked me through it again. And I was like, okay. And the rest of the day we were great and no more problems. And she was actually so nice about explaining it to me that it nearly made up for the fact that I had missed it the first time. Now, if it would have affected, if my daughters wouldn't have got to go on the ride or something, that would have probably left even a bigger brand buster moment on me. But it did affect my day. I walked away that day saying that Disney did not fully deliver today.
Interesting. So what's so amazing about this story is you've been back to Disneyland since then.
Yeah.
Okay. What's so amazing about Disneyland is what we would describe as the ratio between the number of magic moments and brand busters. Because what we realize is that every organization fails to live up to its culture. It's not about being perfect. It's about being consistent.
And you need a plan for it not to be perfect.
Exactly. And you have to make sure that that balance, that ratio is heavily on the magic moment side and very low on the brand busters. And we've all seen where organizations start getting that ratio out of whack, where their brand busters are just eclipsing the number of magic moments. And what ends up happening to those organizations is they go out of business.
Or their brand is so negatively impacted by that they actually change their brand.
Yes, it becomes something totally different.
Yeah, it's like you start feeling like that's the place you go to have a negative experience.
Yes. Or you say things like, I used to think X or used to like this about Y, but now it's this other thing, which means it's a totally different organization.
Yeah, for sure. So I think it's a simple story, but it's a great demonstration of how a simple interaction can become like a brand buster for your organization. I think kind of my challenge question that I would bring today to the table is, have you ever thought about what are the moments in your organization where the brand buster can happen? What are the places, what are the areas in your organization, where are the interactions happening with your customers where something could go wrong? Have you thought about what is the thing that could go wrong? And if it is going wrong, how are we fixing it so that it doesn't go wrong again? So that we can keep that ratio between these magical moments that we're having with our customers and these brand buster moments that they happen. But how are we making sure that they don't happen very much?
Yeah. And just as a reminder, culture is that line between what you tolerate and what you don't tolerate, what you advocate and what you don't advocate. And in this great example at Disney, we even understood, hearing this story of Nick's, that this was something that is not advocated generally at the park. And therefore, it seemed like it was off-brand. We were like, we understand the brand so well and the culture so well that we knew this was off.
Yeah. And I think it just comes full circle with our conversation about the importance of culture, is that you have to address culture. Maybe not, you need to be thinking about culture every day at your organization.
Yes.
What are the magical moments that we're trying to facilitate? What are the brand busters that we're trying to avoid? And how do we train our people to create the magical moments? And how do we train our people to avoid brand busters?
Very good. Very good. And who is it in your organization who's looking out for these issues so that there's somebody who is attending to it and asking these kinds of questions? Because I agree with Nick. These are the most important questions within an organization.
Yeah. And I mean, I would be interested to ask you, Rob, like what happens in an organization when we just let it go? Like when we never ask the question, what are the magic moments? When we never ask the question, where are we busting our own brand? What happens?
That line I described between what you tolerate and don't tolerate, what you advocate and don't advocate, moves. And as that line moves, your culture changes. And as your culture changes, your brand changes. And that can be devastating.
Yeah. And so there's almost like, you could almost call it like a culture creep.
Yes.
You think you have a culture, but that actually isn't your culture.
Well, and if you've worked in any organization long enough and you hear the words, well, there's been a culture shift, that's not usually said in positive terms. It's usually said, we used to value this, but now we don't. So, hey, Nick, thanks. That was a great story. We'll see you guys in the next podcast. But if you have questions, go ahead and send them to us, and you can go to tg3.com and submit a question for us to talk about in the podcast. And if you have a story to share, feel free to share your story. We love to share that with more people. We're all about how do you get to a brighter future faster. Thanks for listening.